Good afternoon. Great to see everybody here. Hope you're enjoying Signal. My name's Dirk Williamson, and we have a presentation to talk to you about A2P and P2P and all things on messaging and what's happening in the messaging world. With me is Peter Tan, who leads up our product development, and on the side over here is Lodema Steinbach, who's joined us after quite a few years with Verizon and manages our messaging portfolio. Wait for our slides to come up here. I can start a little bit on what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of SMS. We don't really think about it every day. We use it every day. And how did this become such a ubiquitous form of communication? And then what do we see happening in the future? So I'll talk about the timeline on that. And then we're going to hand it over to Peter, and he's going to talk about what we're doing on the product development side and what's happening within A2P and P2P channels for SMS. That was all right. So we start in the 1990s, early 1990s, the grunge movement's on. Everybody that was around then can remember it. I actually started for a company that was very unknown at that time called Nokia. And Nokia was actually the first text messages ever sent over SMS. SMS comes out of the GSM consortium. So at the time, if you go back to how mobile was, each country had done different implementations of mobile. They did not work. The phones didn't work in each country. You could have, the Nordics had one system, the US had an analog mobile phone system, and the first digital system was called GSM, and the global system mobile. And in the GSM consortium, as they were coming together on what they could be able to do with GSM, the idea that you were going to digital meant that you needed to have a certain amount of control bands which managed the call. Not to get too technical, but it was called time division multiple access. They took the voice, they turned it into digital and moved it through different time slots. To control that, you needed this control channel, but as engineers do, they saw that it wasn't being used fully. So the idea was use that control channel to send really small pieces of data. That's where 160 characters comes from. So a very small amount of data, and it didn't need to be real time like voice did. It could clip, voice would clip if it wasn't real time, but you could actually be slightly delayed with SMS. So the first message was sent in 1993 in December. Anybody know what the first message was? Merry Christmas. It should have been ahoy, but it was Merry Christmas. And then Nokia launched the 2110. It was the first GSM phone launched in Europe that supported SMS. But it was a long time before you got to interoperability. So the first thing was in 2000, you had buckets of messages and they were really expensive to use, and you could only use them with people on your network. So you had about 35 messages per month that the average user sent. You move yourself forward a little bit into 2001. The US network started to do interoperability. If anyone was around back then, if you actually knew how the email address worked, you could text somebody on another network, they would reply to you from an email address. It was really, really strange and awkward, so nobody sent it. Next, you had MMS, the ability to send small pictures that came across in 2002. And then in 2000, it's really hard to read these fonts. In 2006, shortcodes launch. Shortcode is the first real A2P. So P2P versus A2P. P2P is person to person. A2P is application to person. So shortcodes were an attempt by the carrier community and the CTIA to come together and find a way for brands to communicate. And it works really great. Unfortunately, it's not conversational. So P2P has been leveraged, and we'll talk further about this, has been leveraged for both A2P and P2P, the P2P channels. In 2007, you see the text overtakes the calls in the US. So short period of time, it goes from 35 messages per month to where there's more text happening than voice. In 2010, you have our Twilio launch of our SMS platform. And then in 2013, texting over toll-free numbers, which is the second A2P channel that launched. So now you had a 10-digit capability over an 800 number. And in 2019, the US carriers announced A2P 10DLC, meaning a normal phone number, not an 800 number, that you could send 10-digit line calling. So that's where we stand on what has happened within the SMS ecosystem. So the evolution of A2P, the 10-digit long codes were for P2P communication. The original idea behind SMS is person-to-person communication. That was how it was thought of. The short codes were developed for A2P conversations. It's a great way for a brand for you to be able to interact with a brand in a one-way conversation, but not conversational. Then toll-free texting was added as a channel, and from 2019 onwards, A2P over long codes will be possible, and that's what Peter's going to talk about.
You go one more slide.
Oh, that's sorry, one more. Then the most popular use case that we can all remember from shortcode, for messaging was American Idol. So when American Idol launched, that was really when you started to see the explosion of shortcode SMS. Also, one of the major things that happened over SMS was Obama announced Joe Biden over an SMS communication. That was the first time that had been done. So SMS has been used universally.
Right, and at Twilio, we really have the benefit of seeing all the things you build. Over the years, SMS product's been around for 9 years, and we see the same use cases come up again and again. At Twilio, we've broadly categorized these into 4 major buckets. First is marketing. So any sort of coupons, loyalty. I know like 5 Stars is one of the services I use when I'm getting lunch around the SF Bay Area. Key in your phone number, get a free drink that day, always makes my day. So these are your marketing use cases. The next is verifications. Anytime you receive a passcode to your phone to log in to SSO, whatever it is, sometimes you get receipts to verify that you made a bank transfer or payments went through. These are what we call verification messages. The third is notifications. Your flight's delayed, your gates change, delivery scheduled for later today. And the last is conversations. You heard a lot about it this morning, and it's any sort of customer support use case, and it's a person-to-person communication to achieve some sort of business objective. So we see these 4 use cases at Twilio, and anybody who's been a long-term Twilio customer knows that the choice of your phone number, especially in the US, has always been critical to the success or failure of your use case. And if you've been on the phone with one of our sales engineering team members, they would tell you that if you're trying to do marketing, you want to use a short code, and how these phone numbers have a different experience for the end user and how they interact with the number. So what we're going to talk about is a little bit more about the phone numbers and what's changing in the world of A2P 10-digit long codes and what that might mean for you as our customers. So the first one is short codes. The characteristics of short codes are 8 to 12 week provisioning time. It's pretty lengthy, but what it does get you is increased throughput on the networks, right? You've been approved by the carriers to send specific marketing messages or notification messages at scale. You have a big open highway in front of you to the networks. This can send a lot of messages, and it's also dedicated for A2P. The downsides of a short code is that there's no way for people to call back. If they need help, you need to be able to redirect them to a different channel. So when we look at some of the pros and cons of short codes, it's great for high volume messaging. If you're a big brand, large marketing campaigns, you're pushing out a ton of notifications, you definitely want a short code. There's strong brand perception and legitimacy. Whenever you get a 2FA code from a short code, it's that much more legitimate because not everybody can just go show up and buy a short code. But some of the cons are when you're trying to thread conversations, if you're talking with 1,000 people across 3, 4 different brands that your short code serves, it's actually really hard to manage and understand which participant is talking to which brand. Short code's not really great for that use case. And lastly, if people need help, they can't call back. So they have to text in help, you respond with them. If you need help, please call here or go to this website, and they're taken out of channel, right? They're taken away from the messaging app into something else. So that's short codes. For toll-free, that was introduced a couple of years ago, 6 years ago, so it's more than a couple, it's instantly provisionable. So that's a major advantage it has over short codes. Unfortunately, throughput initially was limited to 3 messages per second, so you weren't really running large campaigns. I know we recently announced that this goes up to 25, but compared to 100 and up on short codes, there's still a physical limitation as to how quickly you can push out messages on short code. Good news is that it's dedicated for A2P and people can call back. So when we look at the pros and cons of toll-free phone numbers, it's really great for existing brands. So there's a lot of legacy businesses who've held on to their toll-free numbers for decades, and this lets you add text functionality to those businesses. But unfortunately, that same legacy and history that toll-free voice comes with, people aren't quite conditioned to text into a 1-800 number or 188 number. You see a message coming through a toll-free number, you're always a little confused, like, is this a long code? Like, how is this phone number texting me? It's not a technology that's really pervasive that we all understand yet, we've been conditioned to as consumers. But good news with phone numbers is that it's approved A2P phone number. You can give one to brands. So if you're serving small businesses, each business can have their own toll-free phone number, which is a lot more cost efficient than assigning a short code to each brand. So going back to the throughput issues, it works at small scale, it works really well up to medium scale, but if you're a really, really large national brand, a single toll-free phone number may not actually serve your needs. So now we look at long code, and we're going to look at long code in the lens of before A2P and what are the characteristics. So everybody here, I presume, has signed up for a Twilio account, and when you're going through that trial, we give you a phone number, and that is most likely a long code in the area that you're signing up from. So you sign up for UK, we'll give you a +44 UK number. If you're signing up in San Francisco, you try to get a 415 phone number, and it's immediately there. It's there for you to play with. But there are limitations. Like Dirk said, long codes were meant for P2P. How quickly can you text your mom? Even if you text K to your mom asking you whether you're going to be home for dinner, you're not really sending more than a few a minute. And so there's really low throughput on long codes. And long codes before were not really approved, were not dedicated for A2P. You had A2P traffic mixing with P2P traffic. And so you've got, when Twilio came around in 2010 and we gave you the ability to start sending programmatic messages from these long codes, that message was in the same pipes alongside people talking to each other, which was a little chaotic for the carriers initially, but then we've worked with them and we're really excited to be working with them for what is going to be A2P for 10DLC. So recap real quickly on long codes before, pros is easily obtainable. You could appear local based on the area code. It was easy to thread conversations because you can spin up a unique phone number per conversation you were having. But some of the cons were that it was not really meant for messaging at scale, and it was shared route with P2P messages. So marketing was completely off the books. Any sort of high volume automated messages, be it verifications or notifications, was questionable depending on how much you were sending. It was really only good for conversational use cases. So moving into long codes after A2P, we're really excited to see what's coming down the pipes. It's still going to have the same things you liked. It's easily obtainable. Throughput is still being worked out, but we're talking with the carriers to understand if there can be more than just the 1 message per second limit. It will be on its own connections dedicated for A2P, and your consumers can still call back and text back. And so looking at the pros and cons, you have everything that was made long codes good, and now additionally, you can give out a phone number per brand. There might be increased throughput, we're still working through that. It's on a connection that's dedicated for A2P, and most importantly, it's going to be a seamless transition. We want this transition from pre-A2P 10DLC to post-A2P 10DLC to have minimal as an impact to our customers as possible, and so you don't have to do anything, and that's how we like it here at Twilio. So to summarize real quickly, looking at the phone numbers, long codes, short codes, toll-free, the biggest change that you'll see is that long codes before, they were not on a dedicated route for application to peer messaging. They will be on a dedicated route for application to peer messaging after this. It may come with increased throughput, still working through that. And that's really the big change that we're excited about and want to work with you, the customers, and the carriers to make the messaging ecosystem better for everybody. So we're going to dive into some question and answer section, but before that, we want to address a few common questions first. First is, will this change my Twilio phone number? No, it will not. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to make any changes to your phone number. Second, what do you need to do? Absolutely nothing. Third, is there a new fee associated route? I'll let Dirk answer that one.
Yeah, so the carriers have been working together with us on the A2P channels, and there right now is a dedicated A2P channel available on Verizon, and that has a cost, but the other costs have not been established. Again, to echo what Peter had said, this is really something that allows the channel to be dedicated for A2P traffic, and A2P traffic is different than P2P traffic, so it will allow us to have really great deliverability and be aligned with what the carrier community is looking for.
Right. And so we have 2 more questions. When will this launch?
Once again, right now there's an available A2P channel on Verizon. The other carriers are working on their A2P approach, and as soon as they're ready to announce, we will be right there with them and moving your traffic.
Right. And then the last common question we have is that I'm already a short code customer. Does this mean I should move all my traffic to long codes? And our answer this time is that there is a place for every phone number type depending on what you're trying to do. Short codes are still by far the preferred choice for what you're trying to do. And the answer to this is work with our team here, help us understand your needs, and we'll be able to make the correct recommendation for you. And so now we'll open up to questions.
Sure. So the question was, the A2P channel that's available, is that the one that has been communicated that was going to be mandatory, and multiple times those dates have moved? Yes, it's been open and available since February, but it has not. We have not made a mandatory move over to that channel. So the question is, does a toll-free channel prevent spam filtering? So there's filters associated with all traffic because everyone wants to monitor and make sure that there's quality traffic being delivered. But the 800 number delivery is a A2P delivery. So if we were to talk to a carrier today about your traffic and why it might not be going through, if you're on an A2P channel, that's a very easy conversation. It should be going through. It's on 800 right now. If it's on 10 DLC, that's not a dedicated channel for A2P. So it's not high on their concern level that our traffic might not be getting through, and that makes our efforts a lot harder to go through. Is there any limitation on number of conversations per day for A2P?
Not that we've
No.
Nothing that's been communicated to us yet, but it is still early days. We're still working in carriers to understand the full details, but the rules that apply the CTIA guidelines for what's P2P versus A2P do, if I recall correctly, there's a number of conversations per day on the P2P, but not for A2P.
Correct.
Yeah. One more question.
Lodima might have a build answer there.
Hello.
Come on up, Lodima.
Hey. What I would say is that the carriers want all of your traffic, and they're working really hard to make sure that they can get your traffic and their customers are protected. So all of these questions are actually getting funneled back to them, and they're looking for solutions for us and for you.
In your experience, what's the general viability of taking a legacy toll-free number like Verizon and text enabling it, having the text terminate
So,
You want to repeat the question?
So the question was, in our experience, what has the general viability been for taking a toll-free number from one of the carriers and then text enabling it on Twilio? Is that correct? So we have a whole team that supports this functionality. We've not really seen any issues. So generally, the proof is in the pudding. If you give us a list of toll-free numbers, we'll run it by with our partners and make sure if those can have the text messaging service pointed towards us.
I would say, to add to that, in some cases, there are some carriers that want to keep their own numbers and have text messaging services on them. So you may want to reach out to them to port it over to Twilio also.
Right.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the question was will there be an option to choose the P2P networks when A2P networks are available to drive the traffic through? Our commitment will be to follow the identification that the carriers have given to the traffic. So if it's A2P traffic and there's an A2P channel available that's been created, it'll travel over the A2P channel. The P2P channel right now is still being leveraged because there is not an A2P channel available for 10-digit long code.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my question. So, you say P2P is shut down for any business messaging traffic when
No. So the question was, will P2P shut down for business messaging traffic? No, but the carriers are going to be monitoring very heavily to ensure that the A2P channel is being leveraged. So when you want to do the exact thing that was brought up on all the value adds of the A2P channels, that means you're going to have ensured deliverability. You're going to have the capability to make sure the quality traffic goes through regardless of the velocity. As we look towards the future on what's going to happen on P2P, there won't be a block for the ability to deliver on P2P, but there certainly will be difficulty getting deliverability, especially at kind of volumes for a business. It will be a much more favorable outcome to use an A2P channel at that time. Can we say something about the price difference between current 10 DLC and future? So we have announced that we will pass carrier fees on with no markup. There's no fees that have been announced for any of the carriers except for Verizon, which is 0.0025. Are there any international carriers that are moving towards dedicated A2P routes?
So my understanding is that this P2P A2P discussion that we're having in the United States is not quite the same as what's happening internationally. Dirk could go into a long history, but how the carriers talk to one another in the US is actually very different from how the carriers in international markets talk to one another in terms of the connection. So this has never been a conversation point when we've been talking about international markets.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll get you next.
Limitation per number or per company or per
So one of the questions are the limits that are going to exist per number or per company? One of the advantages to A2P that we didn't talk about is that a single number can do a lot more on an A2P channel than it was able to do in the 10 digits. So the limitation would be more about, and there really isn't much limitation. To Ladima's point, they want this business, they want this traffic. So a company should be able to send the maximum amount over one number versus 10. Sorry, there was another question in the back.
Okay, that's sort of playing into mine. If I'm using lots of numbers today to send multiple messages at a time,
Yep.
will this eliminate that need entirely?
So the question was, if there's multiple numbers that you're using right now to be able to drive the kind of throughput that you want, will that change with A2P?
Yeah. We hope so. We hope that will be the case. Like, we know it's really painful to have to manage very large pools of phone numbers, just keeping track of all of them, making sure they're utilized correctly. And it's, to the carrier's point, Ludima can correct me if I'm wrong here, it makes life harder for them because they're seeing the same kind of traffic coming from multiple phone numbers. What both you and the carriers want is, good traffic from known phone numbers hitting the consumers who have asked for it. And having the spread load and all these things that we're doing today, it doesn't really serve anybody any good.
Yes.
If I want to continue to have one-to-one P2P conversations with my business as well as A2P, where I obviously have two separate A2P long term.
So the question is, if I still want to have P2P conversations from my business, do I need to have two different sets of numbers? I'll start with it and maybe you can build on it. But the concept as laid out by CTIA is very clearly, if a business is sending a message, that's an A2P message. If you as an individual business owner are texting someone, that's a P2P message. But when your business is sending a single message to a single person, that's still A2P because it's leveraging an application to be able to deliver that message. So the viewpoint would be that that 10-digit number would be an A2P number, even if it's a one-to-one conversational communication.
Okay. Yeah, nothing to add there.
Yes.
So does this require voice also? What happens to all of our voice numbers?
Yeah, so the question was on voice. Does this apply to voice? So this is very much an SMS issue, not a voice issue. The previous speaker was talking about some things that are happening in voice on verification. But nothing changes with your number. We'll text in it. Your number's text enabled, your voice is enabled on the Twilio platform. The move to A2P will be seamless. You won't notice anything. It'll just move to the A2P channel. It won't change anything with the voice number. You don't need a different number for voice, correct?
Yep.
I'm always checking with my product guy when I quote what products do. When there's an available A2P in the U.S. market, all the Twilio numbers, when there's available A2P by that carrier, we'll move to that A2P channel. No, the number stays the same. Yep. Again, seamless to you. That's what today we wanted to talk about.
All right, we got about 3 more questions. Is there any plans or possibilities for MMS on A2P?
We don't have it today, but the plan is yes, in the future.
2 more questions if needed. 1.
Is there an application process part for the new A2P? Is it like there's a short?
Is there an application process for the A2P? We're still working through the requirements. So today, the known A2P channel at Verizon does not have an application process. It's simply that you choose to move over to that A2P channel. Others are determining how they're going to have their onboarding set up. What we are driving is to have it as frictionless as possible for you. And so there is a clear understanding in the carrier community that the short code process is cumbersome. And so there's a desire not to enter the same type of process for A2P, but we don't have those requirements yet. Last question? Anyone? Okay, well, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of Signal.